This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country and join their calls for justice. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
Breaking news. Tearing up bits of paper. Very, very bad. The worst thing you can do. Worse than racism. Officially confirmed by Australian Parliament. Independent Senator Lydia Thorpe has been suspended from Parliament after she threw pieces of paper at One Nation's Pauline Hanson as a row over racism erupted. Lead with the paper. That's good, don't you think, guys? Like racism, whatever. But like the main thing is this piece of paper being fucked up.
It's actually hilarious watching politicians on both sides and political journalists very seriously trying to make the case as to why this is such a heinous offense that required, a senator to be suspended, which happens very, very, very rarely. And The best they could muster up was she tore up pieces of paper and flung them in the direction of Pauline Hanson. It's unclear whether, Parliament is this intense kind of a hotbed of drama and intensity and political debate. And politicians, they go to Canberra for days at a time. They kind of start losing their minds towards the end. It's unclear whether they're aware of how silly this sounds or they're just trying to roll the dice. This is one of the most absurd, I think, things that I've seen in Parliament. One of the most absurd attempts to justify the suspension of a senator that I've seen as well.
Well, I think that it was physical violence, and I think Pauline Hanson felt unsafe, and I think you don't care about violence against women, man. I think it's pretty fucked up.
I mean, my favorite thing about all of this is the amount of times every politician, particularly the ones from the Labor side like Katie Gallagher, are saying, look, regardless of whether you agree or disagree with Hanson, this went too far. Let's pause for a second. What do you mean regardless of whether you agree or disagree? This person is acting in a terrible manner to the handful of non-white women senators there are in Senate. You can't just hand wave away regardless whether you disagree with her.
Apparently you can. On Wednesday, Hanson had attempted to refer Senator Fatima Payman to a parliamentary committee over her dual Afghan citizenship, questioning her eligibility to sit in the upper house. Now, I looked this up. Fatima Payman, of course, she got elected in 2022. Post the Section 44 nonsense, of course, so she did everything she possibly could. She sought legal advice. The Taliban, of course, don't recognize her renunciation of her Afghani citizenship, but of course, none of this matters to Pauline Hanson. She says, no, you don't belong here, literally. Why don't you go back home? Payman said in response to Hanson's actions yesterday morning, you're not just vindictive, mean, nasty, you've been disgraced to the human race. No dignity whatsoever as a senator. Thorpe, in supporting Payman, shouted, convicted racist at Hanson, and threw torn-up documents at her, according to the AAP. Labor Senator Penny Wong later moved a motion to suspend Thorpe due to the gravity of her conduct. The government coalition Hanson, David Pocock and Ralph Babbitt voted in favour of the motion, while the Greens voted against it. Now, this is great because Ralph Babbitt recently censured by the Senate because he tweeted a raft of disgusting slurs. He was censured for that. I believe he deleted the tweet eventually, but he's really worried about appropriate conduct in the Senate.
I mean, when you've got Ralph Babbitt on side, you're probably on, you're doing the right thing. I mean, but that does exemplify what a bizarre outcome this was. So you have the Babbitt situation. He censured last week in the same motion that they censure Lydia Thorpe for the first time, right? So this is the major party saying, we think these two things at that stage, Lydia Thorpe criticizing the king and colonialism is equally as bad as Ralph Babbitt using homophobic slurs and the N-word. And then this week...
worse. I would argue worse because the motion against Thorpe was you can't represent this Senate as any delegation for the rest of this term. Like there was a harsher punishment for her.
Yeah, she was actually tangibly punished rather than just kind of the esoteric censure that Babbitt faced. And then this week you have Hanson who, yes, was recently found by a federal court to have acted in a racist manner towards Greens Deputy Leader Osman Faruqi and my mum. They're the same person, not two separate people. And she is trying to, I think this is a thing that was missed in a lot of the reporting and conversation about this week. Hanson has announced that she's going to challenge that. She's going to appeal that. She's seeking leave in front of the full bench of the federal court to appeal that. She wants to overturn Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act. She's seeking to raise enormous amounts of funds for that. So, I mean, it seems pretty obvious to me that her attacking Payman, hoping for this kind of reaction, is a kind of media coverage she wants that she can use on her media ecosystem, on Sky News, in News Corp media, to say, look at me, I'm trying to take down these crazy leftist Muslim senators, and they're trying to shut me down. So she's gotten what she wanted by using the Senate to create a stunt, essentially, but she's not punished for it. This is kind of an absurd situation, Tom, where I don't know if you know this, but you can't call someone a racist. in the Senate.
Well, that's
It's
unparliamentary.
Unparliamentary. It's crazy. This person has been found by a federal court to be racist. They're the leader of a far-right anti-immigration party. But if you say anything to that, you're the one that gets in trouble. And, I don't even, I feel so silly saying I don't endorse the ripping up of papers and throwing them at senators. But it seems crazy that even if you think that behavior is bad, you can't somehow find a way to say, I actually don't think Pauline Hanson should be allowed to be a racist as well.
Yeah, Jesus. Coalition Senate leader Simon Birmingham called the motion a line in the sand and accused the Greens of a shameful double standard. So the Greens came out and said, hey, we don't endorse this kind of behavior. We don't endorse, I think Larissa Waters literally said, we don't endorse physical violence. I'm like, come on, guys.
Yeah.
But they sort of said the broader context of the kind of bullshit racism that Pauline Hanson was spewing is part of it. And that's why we didn't support this particular motion. I mean, again, with Simon Birmingham, he's announced his retirement, and of course there's all this wave of, he's such a decent, moderate man. I'm like, this motherfucker is backing Israelis' genocidal war on Palestinians. And this entire thing, the outrage around a woman tearing up a bit of paper is more notable and more passionate than any kind of outrage over the killing of tens of thousands of innocent people by one of our allies in this illegal and brutal genocidal war that this Senate broadly supports. I mean, how can you take this place seriously?
It's crazy. And Birmingham, when there were the protests after the Israeli invasion of Lebanon and there was all this debate about Hezbollah flags, Birmingham was one of the first people out the gate saying we need to deport people who are attending these protests. This is this ridiculous kind of circle jerk that happens when a so-called moderate quits parliament and everyone pretends, it was so great having his influence in the party. Like he did a great job of corralling the old school lowercase L, small L liberal faction. If that is what he was doing, he fucking sucked at his job, honestly, because what is the evidence that the Liberal Party has a moderate wing? I mean, that moderate wing was completely wiped out by the Teals last election. So Birmingham was in a faction of one. And even then didn't really seem to espouse many so-called moderate liberal philosophies. It is ridiculous.
No one really counted. Well, we're agreed. Parliament sucks. Let's now keep talking about it for 30 minutes. Here we go.
The Greens have really, in my opinion, lost the plot. They have just been oppositionalists. But as a famous politician once said, only the pure are impotent. And the Greens' in opposition mentality, I think, is turning people off.
We're stuck with the hosts of Chapo Shithouse podcast.
Serious danger to Australia.
Hey, this is Serious Danger. It's a podcast about green politics in Australia. Yes, I fucked that up a couple of times before we've settled on this take. It is not an official Greens Party podcast. It is produced by Michael the Griffin, made possible with the help of the Green Institute. And it is hosted by me, Tom Ballard. Normally, Emerald Moon, who is currently away. She's off for a couple of weeks having a very well-deserved holiday. I am broadcasting to you from Naarm on Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung country, and I am joined by a very special guest co-host, dear friend of the show, son of a Green senator, but that's not as important as his incredible analysis, his writing skills, his journalistic nous. Osman Faruqi, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Tom. Very excited. I think this is the first time I'm on this show free from the shackles of the lamestream media. So let's see how spicy things get.
How's James Massola, your former colleague and a good friend of the show? Is he all right?
Last time I spoke to him, he was doing well.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent. He's a big fan of the show.
Big fan of the Greens. Big fan of the show. Big fan of decorum in federal parliament.
He'll be worried about those pieces of paper. I'll tell you that much. This week, we're going to be talking about the insane rush of legislation that the government did manage to get through this week. In between making censure motions about people tearing up bits of paper, they did a whole bunch of lawmaking, and we're going to discuss whether the Greens capitulated like the weak dogs that they are, or whether there's a strategy going on. And we're going to bring you a taste of our live show that we recorded last week in Sydney with Mr. Mark Humphries and Jenny Leong. Thank you so much to everyone who came out to our live shows last weekend. We had such a blast in Newcastle at the Rising Tide People's Blockade, which was fucking sick. And in Sydney at the Vanguard, it was such a delight to meet a whole bunch of New South Welsh danger dogs. And we really appreciate people coming out. And a huge congrats, as we mentioned at the start of our Sydney show, as we were taking to the stage on Sunday afternoon, the news was breaking that Rising Tide had actually succeeded in turning around a coal ship, God damn it, actually doing some blockading, which was, a real boost. We were discussing on the Saturday that we love the People's Blockade, but at that stage, nothing had actually disrupted the route of coal in and out of the largest coal port in the world. On Sunday, that turned around. 137 arrests, I think, at last count. Did you follow much of what went down in Newcastle last week?
Yeah, man, I love that blockade. Rising Tides is one of the most inspirational direct action things that I reckon the climate movement does in Australia. I had a bunch of friends there, a bunch of people I grew up with in Port Macquarie on the mid-north coast. They were down as well. It's kind of incredible to see the government over years just ramp up the amount of power and police force there. Like I saw videos and photos of cops like taking away paddles to stop people doing this. I think they declared the whole Newcastle coastline a sort of no-go zone to try and stop people doing this stuff. It's crazy, but like stuff like that, man, we're going to talk about so many depressing things, and my general perspective on the state of the world, it's pretty down at the moment. But seeing stuff like that, seeing just legends get out there, get wet, get dirty, and stop the world's biggest coal port from functioning, it actually gives you some hope that there is a way to make the world a better place.
Yeah. Well said. And I don't know if people saw it. Zach, I forget his surname now, but he went on Sky News with Laura Jade. Zach Schofield, sorry. Yeah, which I think we posted, the Griff posted on our Patreon if people want to watch it. Well worth your time. 8 minutes of just calm dismantling of bumbling, ridiculous Sky News talking points about the state of the climate crisis and the transition. And full credit to Zach Schofield, who's been doing the Lord's work out there defending very calmly and brilliantly and cutting through the work of Rising Tide. So check it out if you get a chance.
I've seen this week people are taking the lyrics of Defying Gravity and really holding space with that and feeling power in that.
That's all I wanted.
Holding space.
I didn't know that was happening.
Holding space.
That's really powerful.
Holding space and feeling power in that. I've seen that on a couple posts. I don't know how widespread.
All right, let's talk about this crazy week in Parliament. It's been a fucking legislation bonanza. The Senate ended up passing 32 bills, or the Parliament generally, 32 bills. There was a late night session on Thursday night, and on Friday morning, the House of Reps came back together to finish off the last 10, I believe. There was guillotining of debate left, right, and centre with the help of the Greens, which seems like a very dramatic term, but it was certainly quite a rush.
Let's talk about violence in Parliament. They're talking about guillotining, 100 times a day.
If only there was more guillotining happening in Canberra. I mean,
hey.
Oh my gosh. This would be, no, we're peace and non-violent, all that stuff. The government did not get everything through they wanted to. They did shelve a bunch of stuff, which they didn't get support for. We'll talk about that in a moment. But you'd have to say the Albanese government would be pretty happy with themselves, managing to pretty much bulldoze a shitload of stuff. Anthony Albanese is out there saying, this is what we're working, we're turning promises into progress. We'll get into the specifics of it, but I guess generally, what did you make of this big strategy, this sort of end-of-term energy that the government went with, just trying to ram shitloads of stuff through as much as possible before the end of the year, potentially before the Parliament is dissolved for the next election in 2025?
Yeah, look, it's interesting because obviously there's two reasons I would say that you want to pass laws, right, as a government. One is you want to do things that you care about, right? Or you say you care about. You want to change the country in a certain direction. And on that metric, the government passed, just over 30 bills. And so they can pat themselves on the back and say, we're really proud of these changes we've made, from social media bans to heinous immigration policy to tweaks to nature laws and housing funding and all that sort of stuff. The other reason you want to pass laws as a political party, as a government, is you want to be able to tell people what you've done. And if this is the last sitting week before an election, and it seems likely that is the case, it seems like a very strange tactic to use, to ram through 32 bills that the vast majority of people probably weren't even aware were on the table. Like some of this stuff had just been sitting on the shelves for the past couple of years and was brought out because the government needed Pocock support for this bill. And in return, he wanted that bill, so they did these last-minute deals. It's a very odd political strategy, I think, Tom, because what you've ended up with is a very confused end of the week. The government, what is the government going to talk about here? It wants to talk about the social media ban. That's a big thing. It's been trying to make a topic of conversation for the last few months. It probably also wants to talk about the immigration stuff that it is largely doing to deflect attacks that are coming their way from the coalition and from the media. It also wants to talk about cost of living. This is a government that says they're laser focused on the cost of living, but it's unclear which of these 32 bills is related to the cost of living. So I think it's one of these things where when you're in the kind of bubble of Canberra, and you're really excited about your student politics approach to getting the deals done. And, you got 4 bills passed with the support of the coalition. You got 27 passed with the Greens and the crossbench. And, we did it, guys. Like, can you imagine the amount of crazy negotiation we had to do? I don't think any of that translates into the real world whatsoever. And I don't agree with the social media ban, for example, but it's very popular policy. Like, a lot of people in the community think this is good and necessary. Parents are freaking out. But how does the government sell that message when it was passed at like 11:30 at night on Thursday in a flurry of, multiple other things? It's a very strange strategy from them, but it's also an inevitable outcome. I think this is like a record low number of sitting weeks. Governments don't like parliamentary sitting weeks. They don't like scrutiny. They don't like having to deal with the Senate. They don't like having to deal with committees and inquiries and do these negotiations. So there's this tactic that's emerged over the last few terms where this happened. There's fewer and fewer sitting weeks. There's a rush towards the end. They guillotine debate. They pass a bunch of stuff. Maybe that's good in terms of their policy agenda, but it remains to be seen how it's effective in terms of them going to an election and saying, hey, you might not remember this, but just before the Christmas period, we passed a whole bunch of bills that you don't know anything about. We're pretty good at governing. You should vote for us this election as well. What did you make of it?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I guess, look, the big story that seems to be reported generally, I mean, yes, the social media ban is sort of leading in there. The start of the week started with the chat about housing, and we'll get to that in a moment too, with the Greens, deciding to support those housing reforms. The big story is like, hey, look, the government is doing something, which I think does combat a narrative, which is the Albanese Labor government is a do-nothing government and haven't done much at all. But you're right. I mean, picking apart all these different legislative agendas, and if they really want to zero on cost of living, they'd be talking about, housing, maybe student debt, the supermarket code of conduct, which I'm sure will transform everybody's lives.
But I mean, that's a good point, because they did do that. They did do the student debt stuff this week. They did do the housing. They did do the supermarket code of conduct stuff this week.
Yeah.
But do you think people, like voters, care about this meta idea of government is passing bills as distinct from government passed this particular bill that will make my life better because it's relieving my student debt, or it's going to force the supermarkets to lower their prices?
Yeah, I mean, it's not enough to get you over the line, but I guess doing, again, that perception of doing anything, of changing anything, of getting anything done, I think that can count against the government. I think for a long period in this term, the perception of Labor government is that it was a bit directionless. It was giving up on the stuff it said it would do and didn't get stuff done. And, no doubt they're figuring out a strategy between now and the next election in which they can succinctly say, here's the things that we've achieved, and they'll pick up their favorite headlines of it, and then they'll say, here's what we want to do next.
It's a good point.
Student debt either side of the election, so they're changing the indexing to reduce student debt now in this term, and then have promised to wipe 20% off student debt if they're re-elected. So that's kind of maybe a two-pronged strategy, of an example of what they'll be going for.
Yeah, no, I think that does make sense. And I think at the least it's given them this big arsenal of stuff to micro-target, right, during the election campaign. If there's electorates that are really worried about the student debt issue or grocery stuff or whatever, you can see Labor MPs with their Canva Instagram tiles custom made for each of those bills being rolled out. So it may just be in the immediate aftermath, it looks very overwhelming and is very unclear what the story is, but it does give them something in the chamber to go and talk to people about when it comes election time.
Yeah. No, we don't have to spend too long on this, but I mean, should we care at all about the degradation of the parliamentary process? I mean, Jackie Lambie's out there saying this is insane. She did have quite a good line. She was saying, so much for disconnect from work laws. Like last night, the night before she had to go to Parliament, she had to read like 40 bills or whatever. This guillotining debate, which was agreed to by the Greens, like the Labor was able to guillotine debate on a bunch of this stuff. It's because of the Greens. They did get some concessions out of that, which we can also talk about. But I mean, I don't know. To me, this does expose, again, how ridiculous this idea that Parliament is supposed to be a place of scrutiny, that members are supposed to be given enough time and enough information in order to adequately assess these bills and make a decision. And they sort of go, no, it's simply a powers game. It's about power and numbers. And if we've got the numbers, we're going to push this Parliament through with no debate around these big issues facing the country. Who gives a shit?
I mean, I think it does matter. I think it matters more on some bills than on others. I think the social media ban is a really good example of that.
Yeah.
I think this is a pretty historic and significant law that will have ramifications that we can't really imagine yet. Like when this actually is enacted, like the government's admitted that the mechanics of it will be dependent on a trial that hasn't begun yet, right? So the fact that we are passing legislation that fundamentally transforms how we engage with the entire internet, and we didn't have more than one day or like half a day's worth of hearings. We didn't have enough people scrutinizing bits of detail in that bill. We didn't set up sunset clauses, all this sort of stuff. I think that is a concern. I think the same thing goes for the immigration bills. I know the government's been saying that, this is something they've been foreshadowing for a while. We know how fraught immigration law is in this country. We also know that these bills are a reaction to the High Court striking down previous government legislation, right? And so what's a good way to avoid that happening? Even if you're looking at this from the government's perspective, you want to make sure that it's watertight, it's gone through a process. It's, you've kind of dotted the I's and crossed the T's here. It doesn't seem like that's happened at all on a whole bunch of this sort of stuff. And it just means we're probably likely to be in a situation where maybe there's high court challenges against both these things, the social media bill and the immigration bills. And we're back again. And the worst thing in the immigration sense is these people who are the most vulnerable people in our country are plunged into months more, years more uncertainty and dismay, all because the government didn't really want to have proper processes towards the end of Parliament. That doesn't feel like a very good, I guess it runs anathema in a way to the point you're making earlier, where a government that gets things done, we're very good at running these processes, but you're not really good at running these processes if you're rushing through flawed legislation that could end up being struck down. That's actually pretty bad at governing. It's on the baseline of governing is passing laws that the High Court think are good, not laws that the High Court think are unconstitutional and shouldn't have been passed in the first place.
We haven't talked too much about the migration bills, but very briefly, they're about taking away mobile phones from people who are in detention. They're about making it easier to deport non-citizens to third countries, and no guarantee that those countries they're going to are signatories to the Refugee Convention. Terrible shit like that. I was at a refugee legal dinner earlier this week, and across the refugee rights sector, these laws have been deplored as they're cruel, they're contravening human rights, and they've just been rushed through and go against any sense that we had that the Labor government might be a little bit more lenient. And they have done some good things, including converting people from temporary protection visas to more permanent protection. But these are dog shit laws that will be legally challenged by organizations like Refugee Legal and this Arms Seeker Resource Centre and fought against, and they should be called out. But of course, it's Labor trying to outflank Dutton once again on the matters of immigration.
And it never works. You already see Dutton claiming credit for it, right? The coalition came out and said, we are writing immigration policy in this country. I think the timing is also, it's also interesting because, Australians, and I mean collectively, I think even like slightly conservative leaning Australians who might vote for Dutton generally like to think of themselves as people who, this is Australia. Someone like Trump could never get elected here. Like we couldn't have that kind of rhetoric around deportations the way that Trump is doing. I mean, Trump's roadmap for immigration policy is heavily, heavily based on what Australia's been doing for the last few decades. He famously told Malcolm Turnbull back in 2018, you guys are even worse than I am. I mean, this bill that's been passed, the Senate inquiry heard that it would be up to 80,000 people were deported. This stuff is Trumpian. There's no other way to put it. And I think the lack of an acknowledgement of that in Parliament and even within media and the discourse around this, I think is significant, because you see the same people write opinion pieces saying Trump is terrible and it's so great we've got an Australian system that stops us from having someone like Trump. And then they're completely silent on the fact that we just passed the worst immigration policies in the Western world that will continue this trajectory of Australian immigration policy being a blueprint for far-right governments all around the world. It was a really, really sad outcome. Again, as you pointed out, like more devastating for the fact that it's being ushered in by a Labor government, right? Yeah. It's not even, coalition didn't even try to do this when they were incumbent. This is the Labor government doing it. It's a kind of, not enough superlatives to use on this one, I reckon, Tom. It's just pretty fucked.
On the social media ban, everyone's sort of saying, how the fuck is this going to work? It's not going to kick in for a year. They still haven't done this trial. I don't know if you saw Josh Taylor, who's a great tech reporter, posted this on Blue Sky. On the VPN question, the idea of people using a VPN to potentially get around the verification process, whatever the fuck they are, the department is suggesting that if someone uses a VPN to sign up, then the platforms would be expected to check their posts on social media to see if they're actually based where the VPN says that they are.
Oh my God, that's incredible.
So Elon Musk is going on your X feed and being like, are there enough posts here indicating this person is in Argentina? No. Yeah. All right, we're cracking down. And it's just like, did they talk to anyone who uses the internet at any point on
it's crazy. My favorite thing in his builds, I saw someone, it might have been Josh on Blue Sky, maybe Karen Wilson has been doing good reporting on this as well, that there's a clause that lets the minister exclude any under 16-year-old from the from the legislation if, like, for whatever reason they think that this kid needs to be. I don't understand. It seems like maybe that was a reaction to, you across, Leo Puglisi and
Of
6
course,
News
of
and whatever.
course. Yes,
They're
big
doing
fan.
their thing and they're doing cool stuff. And Leo's like, I'm over 16 now, but a bunch of my staff aren't. I don't know if you hate them or whatever. But it's going to be the minister being like, Leo and Maggie and that whole crew, they're all excluded from this bill, and individual teens going to be lobbying the government to be allowed on TikTok and YouTube.
Well,
It's
yeah, I mean, that's
crazy.
good. Let's have a competition, and the quality of your posts will be assessed by Michelle Rowland,
yeah.
and she'll be like, no, this kid actually fucking rules.
like a Hunger Games for posting, and your reward is an X account.
Oh, I look forward to it. All right, let's talk about housing, because the week sort of kicked off with this news. The Greens will vote for Labor's Help to Buy and Build to Rent housing bills, ending a lengthy standoff and handing the government a victory on key elements of its housing agenda. The bills, which would allow up to 40,000 first home buyers to co-purchase homes with the government and offer a tax incentive for apartment complexes designed for renters and push up house prices, now have the numbers to pass the Senate without significant amendments. Greens leader Adam Bandt said his party had pushed as hard as it could for Labor to go further on the housing crisis, but would ultimately not stand in its way. We will wave through Labor's housing bills, but this issue is not going away, he said. Housing Minister Claire O'Neil said she was glad the Greens have seen the light, but added that delay is costly. This doesn't excuse the fact they've played with politics on housing for 2.5 years. I hate it when politicians play politics. It's so bad.
Crazy.
Greens housing spokesperson Max Chandler-Mather, who proposed the compromise to the Greens party room, which I thought was an interesting detail, said he had decided to give Labor the benefit of the doubt. I think our job here in Parliament is to find compromises. But he did not apologise for the party's decision to delay the bills for months, accusing the government of tinkering around the edges of this housing crisis. At the end of the day, the government doesn't care about renters. Then, if the government doesn't care about renters, then it's up to them. But you can't accuse us of not trying, he said. What did you make of this back down, this backflip, this capitulation? Oz, is this pathetic action for the Greens? What did you make of it?
I think this is really interesting, Tom. I think it's really fascinating, both in terms of the current debate on housing policy. I think it's fascinating in terms of what it says about the relationship between Labor and the Greens. I think it's really interesting in terms of what it says about the fault lines going to this election. I think it's really revealing about where the Greens see themselves currently in the political landscape and how much confidence they have. I think all sorts of different bits there that are worth kind of unpacking separately. On the kind of the bill itself, and this is a really interesting one. I think let's just leave aside for a second whether the Greens should have eventually passed this bill. Let's just talk about what the Greens themselves were saying about this bill in the form in which they decided to support it, right? And obviously they were under enormous pressure from the Labor Party, from a lot of housing NGOs, from most of the media, asking them to just pass this bill. This whole thing about, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, blah, blah, blah. Like, it might not be great. Just pass it. And Max Chandler-Mather was pretty honest and blunt about this. He wrote this piece in Jacobin where he said Australia is facing the biggest housing crisis in generations and Labor's plan will make it worse, right? This is the plan that he's just announced that he's supporting. In that piece, he effectively said that if we pass this bill in its form, it will kneecap the growing grassroots housing campaigns. That was the Greens' position, that if we pass this bill, as flawed as it is, it basically demobilizes the campaign work that we've been doing, and it means that the pressure is off the government and anyone else to take housing seriously anymore. I haven't heard the Greens explain why none of that is true anymore.
Yeah.
And I think by their own rhetoric and by their own, I guess, strategy before they announced this, fair to say, surprise capitulation, it's an odd move that contradicts a lot of the approach to housing they've been taking, which is to pick fights with Labor and say, this is not just about passing terrible legislation. This is about fighting on an issue that we think is fundamentally and generationally defining and important. And if we do pass it, then we lose the leverage we've got to fight for something better. And I'm happy for you to articulate where the Greens have said, here's XYZ reason we've changed our position on that. I just don't think they have. And I think what that then suggests is that this decision, all those things are still true. And it probably will hinder the growth of the housing. It probably does take leverage off the table. It probably will, I guess, create a bit of a vacuum when it comes to a debate around housing policy. I think what it really suggests is the Greens feeling a bit defensive and a bit scared about going into an election campaign with Labor saying the reason why housing is unaffordable in this country is because the Greens refuse to support our housing policy. I think that's a really interesting indication of where the Greens' political mentality is at. I also think it's a miscalculation, if I'm honest with you. I don't know if I'm going to go as far as saying, they're pathetic, weak dogs, as you're leading me towards. But I think it is, like, they blinked. There's no other way to put it. They were in a standoff with the government. They blinked. They seem to be saying, look, we passed this bill, but we're going to go to the election fighting for more. But what's the argument there? Like, give us more MPs so we can also spend the next 2 years of Parliament pretending that we're going to fight. And at the end of the day, we'll end up caving. It's kind of left them, I think, in a politically confused position, and also one where Labor has realized that they've got the upper hand. And I'm not entirely sure why the Greens feel so on the back foot at the moment. Like, it could be all this stuff around, the Queensland election wasn't great, the ACT election wasn't great. What concerns me about that is that's like a narrative, right, that is being prosecuted by the Labor Party and by sections of the media. It's not really true. Like, you guys have talked about this. The Queensland election wasn't this catastrophic failure. The local government elections weren't a catastrophic failure. Sure, the Greens might be plateauing in some areas and growing in others, but there's nothing to suggest from where I sit that they're massively being screwed over and need to change their tactics. I find this to be a really confusing position for them to take. And I also think it's one that leaves them vulnerable on their left flank when you have people like Purple Pingers and the Victorian Socialists who are willing to say, actually, the Greens are sellouts for doing deals with Labor. This bill sucks. I think this, look, I'm not going to say that this is going to destroy the Greens at the next election or anything like that, but I think it's a worrying sign in terms of where they perceive their strength and what they want to do with their numbers in Parliament. That's kind of my take.
Yeah. Look, I was pretty disappointed, man. I think this ends us up with sort of the worst of both worlds. We've now delayed the passage of housing bills with nothing to show for it. And the justification we're getting from Max and Adam is that we weren't going to get anything. We were holding out for concessions, and Labor had made it clear that they weren't going to come to the table there at all. You push as hard as you can. I mean, this is an email that Max sent out to his supporters entitled, "We'll continue the fight for real housing solutions," in which he says that these things won't fix the housing crisis. They won't do much at all. We gave Labor every chance to do something meaningful on housing affordability. We made it clear we wanted to work together. We've made compromise offers to Labor again and again. Last year, we secured $3 billion for social housing around the Housing Future Fund. We were hoping to do that again. Instead, Labor turned down the opportunity to scrap tax handouts for wealthy property investors, and they even rejected our offer to fund an extra 25,000 social and affordable homes from shovel-ready projects. We got close in negotiations. Only a few weeks ago, Labor costed changes to negative gearing in the capital gains tax discount. Now, I'm sorry, this is Green's copium. The idea that we got was the costing of a negative gearing
Man, they made
policy.
a spreadsheet, man. Did you see that spreadsheet they made for us? We did it.
Again, look, I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever in Max Chattermather's dedication to this cause and the fight for it. And I'm sure there is a strategy going behind it. Maybe we'll get Max on the show in the future to sort of talk us through it again. But my understanding is that if you play this hardball game in Parliament, if you hold out and you push for concessions, the only card up your sleeve, the only thing you have to put any power behind those threats, I suppose, is to be prepared to vote no to the bill when it comes to it and wear the political cost of that and say that we're doing this because this bill is not good enough. This bill will make the housing crisis worse, and we demand these like a concession of any description whatsoever. And we believe in that enough to the point in which we will stand by our principles and we'll vote it down. If you never actually do that last step, then your negotiation strategy becomes powerless. I mean, that is the story of the CPRS. I'm sorry, it's often wielded as a weapon against the Greens, but no, the CPRS proved that the Greens were prepared to actually vote no to this stuff, to fight for something better and wear the political cost of it. They were politically rewarded at the 2020 election for that, but also they went on to secure a much better environmental package as a result of that move. So if you're not prepared to actually, wear it at the end and vote no on the bill, then what? Like, what is the point of it? What is the point?
Yeah,
seriously?
I think that's a really good point. And I think actually what it reveals also is that for all the rhetoric about the Greens pivoting to the hard left in this era, under Adam Bandt, the Greens have become extreme. They don't care about the environment anymore. Actually, this term in Parliament has been one where the Greens have folded and capitulated on some very fundamental things. Like early last year, they backed the safeguard mechanism. right? And I wrote a piece at the time saying that that capitulation was one of the biggest victories Labor has had over the minor party, because for the last 10 years, the Greens had played pretty hardball, right? This term, when they voted for Safeguard, it was a similar sort of approach where there was sections of the movement calling for them to support it. There were more radical sections saying, once you pass this pathetic bill that will do effectively nothing, it takes climate change off the agenda and our leverage is gone. That's exactly what happened, right? I actually got someone from Adam Band's office complained to my editors about that piece of bits that they didn't like. And my gut on that was that they didn't like that there was someone with access to mainstream media who was critiquing them from the left on this issue, because then the Greens think, and I think it's largely a smart calculation, where they can make these deals with Labor, they can capitulate, and they can satisfy the criticism they get from the right. Where are the left-wing people going to go, right? They'll throw their hands up, and we'll talk about it on this podcast, but ultimately everyone will vote for the Greens, whatever. That's I think, a calculus that they've made quite smartly over the last few years. So I think basically the signs were there from the start of this political term that the Greens were going to ultimately cave to Labor on these things. I think what's going to be really interesting is where this leaves them in the upcoming election campaign. Does it demotivate campaigners? I think probably. Does it give them a more confused message to sell in terms of, you brought up the amazing example of the CPRS. Like, again, ignore what the mainstream narrative is on that issue. That is a perfect example of a party under enormous pressure saying, this sucks. We're going to fight you on the election about how badly this sucks, and achieving a high watermark in terms of votes and senators. There's so much evidence that that is a useful strategy for a left-wing political party like the Greens to take. I don't understand why they think caving on things like climate and housing before they go an election, when they should be trying to pick fights with the Labor government. I don't understand why they think that's a smart strategy.
Yeah. I mean, again, it just, yes, Labor is clearly zeroing in on this wreckers and delay strategy, right? They really want to capitalize on that. And they think, and they've taken great encouragement from the Queensland election result to say that we can paint the Greens as blockers and barriers to progress, right? And of course, they're going to run that strategy. But yes, it behooves us to flip the argument back onto them. And it needs to be people saying, if Labor's there saying, oh, we tried to do all this stuff, but the Greens stopped us, the question needs to be put to Labor Party. Why don't you support rental caps? Why don't you support a freeze on rents? Why don't you support building more public housing or a publicly owned property developer? Like, those were the things that the Greens were talking about in those debates. Why are you against them? Why can't we have these things? Why can't you do better? Because I do think bitching and moaning about stuff that happened in the last parliament as you're heading into election might not cut through too much. At least the Greens have to make the conversation about actually doing things that will actually make people's lives better and actually address the fundamentals of the crisis rather than any kind of parliamentary stoush.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And look, the other side of this is we're critiquing these parliamentary tactics. By the time this hits campaign land and you're door knocking and you're talking to people, it's quite reasonable. Max knocking on doors and being like, hey, I'm the guy that wants all the things you said, vote for me, right? Like, I don't think this completely cuts out the Greens' opportunity to fight for those things. But I'll be really honest with you about housing, right, at the moment. I think housing is obviously a fundamentally important issue for an enormous amount of people of our generation in particular, but also everyone. I have thought for a while, and I think this decision kind of confirms it, the Greens' position is confusing. And not that I don't see them as being champions on housing, but I do understand, particularly as the discourse has shifted towards, is YIMBYism the solution here? Do we just need to get rid of planning laws and let developers build stuff? And the Greens aren't rejecting that, right? The Greens aren't saying supply is not the problem. They're pointing to other things, but they're not saying supply is not an issue. They're also, they're talking about investment in public housing. They're explicitly going out of their way to say they don't want housing prices to drop. Like, the Greens get asked this question, pretty directly and saying, do you want house prices to fall? The Greens say, no, we don't want house prices to fall, because I guess they don't want to be targeted by a scare campaign saying that the Greens want the value of your family home to drop. I think where they have previously been able to get away with a more vague position on where the guys who care about housing and rent, it becomes harder to cling on to a vague set of ideas when all the major parties are saying they care about housing, when they're putting up specific plans to do it. You then have to be pretty specific and pretty, I guess, watertight yourself. And I'm not convinced that the Greens suite of policies on housing makes an enormous amount of sense. And I can see, and I'm saying this because I speak to lots of people who are a little bit politically engaged, but some of them are not, who are confused. They care about housing, and they're like, maybe Labor is better on housing. Maybe the Greens are better on housing. And I don't know I'm not saying that I've got the 5-point plan to fix it, but I think one of the things you should be doing is, and I think it's exactly what you said, you should be prepared to take the fight directly to Labor and say, why aren't you doing X, Y, and Z? And yeah, maybe they can do that in this election campaign. I think it becomes a little bit harder when Labor will just say, we solved housing. We had a bill. We said it was going to solve it, and the Greens voted for it. The problem's done and dusted. And I think the Greens will then struggle to prosecute their argument in that environment.
Well, okay, devil's advocate, the alternative to that is to say, hey, we voted for the Labor's housing bill. Do we think that solved the problem? Like Labor came up with their solution to the housing crisis, these bills. We talked about how bad they were, how they weren't going to fix the problem, fundamentally change anything. They're passed now. Do we think the problem's fixed? Like, do we think you can just keep voting in Labor governments unchallenged and that's going to result in the serious change that we need? I mean,
I think that's an argument that works in one-on-one conversations with voters. It's an argument that works when you're door knocking. It's not an argument that helps you get cut through in any kind of broader conversation. Like I think, and I think his arguments to me, it's a whole different topic about how much power, the mainstream media have in setting election agenda conversations in this day and age. But the Greens certainly think they do. A lot of decisions the Greens make are based around, what the mainstream media is saying about them. I think it's going to be hard to have a mainstream media debate about housing, given that Labor's got its landmark reform through. I think similar with climate change, right? Like the Greens can say, well, we passed the safeguard mechanism, but that didn't do enough. Who's talked about climate change policy in the last 2 years? No one has. And I think Labor has been very successful on climate and on housing in the way they've maneuvered the Greens, because they've taken two issues that they're the most vulnerable on kind of off the table in terms of the broad narrative that will be had about this election campaign.
Interesting. Well, I'm sure there'll be plenty more. I mean, I still think that housing will be a massive issue at the next election, but you're right, navigating how the Greens talk about that and seeing whether Labor will hold up these reforms as massive wins, as if they're doing stuff. I don't know.
Well, I mean, in Peter Khalil's seat in Wills, where I used to live, already before this bill was passed, he had billboards and things up saying, how much Labor wanted to put into this thing. I think it's in these seats where Labor will be very smart in terms of saying, we delivered on housing, like we're the ones that got this stuff done. So yeah, I think you're right. I don't think this is going to mean that the Greens can't campaign on housing, but I think it becomes harder for them.
Not all bad news on the housing front. I was encouraged to read this. In negotiation with Independent Senator David Pocock and the broader crossbench, Housing Minister Claire O'Neil agreed to amendments that would require the investors to offer 5-year leases for the renters in the build-to-rent projects, while also ruling out no-fault evictions. So, I mean, that is something. That's evidence of pressure around renters' rights. 5-year leases would be, a real change. The vast majority of leases in this country are for 1 year. 5 leases give renters more power. That's good news. In addition, 10% of the homes that are being built under build-to-rent must be affordable housing for people in need. So, again, 10% being affordable is kind of cool.
It's good. It's better than no percent. We're getting there.
Than no percent. And also, in their deal to guillotine a bunch of this debate, the Greens managed to secure $500 million for social housing electrification and a ban on fossil fuel subsidies under the Future Made in Australia scheme in exchange for supporting the guillotining of the debate on those other 27 bills. So we got something kind of on the housing front that wasn't necessarily related to the old negotiations we were talking about. All right, running out of time, but look, everything else that passed, and yet we don't have time to go into details of all this. The government passed anti-doxing laws, the Reserve Bank reforms they got through, the Greens got pretty much everything.
Did they pass the anti-doxing laws? Sorry, this is just me in real time discovering that. That's worrying.
I believe so. I think that got through.
Sorry. You can do all that again if you want to do that.
No, that's all right. That's all right. We love hearing people learn on the podcast. Social media ban, the Future Made in Australia package, the changes to the Privacy Act, family law amendments, the aged care reforms, change to student debt HEX indexing, as we mentioned, and those horrific migration laws. What didn't get through included the gambling ad ban. That's off the table. The electoral funding reform that was announced last fucking week and was going to be introduced. Weird that didn't. What? That's crazy. Oh, well, I guess I'll just keep getting heaps of money from corporate interests. That's a shame. A new superannuation earnings tax on balances above $3 million. That's not happening. A ban on life insurance discrimination on the basis of genetics. and these new environment laws. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has overridden his Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek to scuttle a deal with the Greens over environmental reform. So we heard that they were close to a deal. This is the Environmental Protection Agency. There was a lot of toing and froing between the Greens and Labor on this. She'd been negotiating for months with a crossbench, previously accusing both the Greens and the coalition of being held to ransom by macho extremists within their parties. The Greens negotiators had dropped their demand for a climate trigger and instead were pushing Labor to remove the Regional Forest Agreement and continuous use exemptions in environmental laws. Then apparently, WA Labor Premier Roger Cook called up Anthony Albanese and secured a promise to shelve the reforms amid Labor concerns about potential resources industry attack ads during the next election campaign. Albanese then circumvented Plibersek to call the Greens and declare that the deal was off. Promises into progress. Oz, what do we think about this?
Oh, I know we're running out of time, but this is this is another really fascinating one. So I think this is another example where the Greens were gearing up to basically cave, right? You mentioned they dropped the climate trigger stuff. The reporting in the last couple of days suggests they'd also dropped any demands around ending, native forest logging. They were ready to pass this bill with a couple of very minor tweaks to it so they could claim a win. And it's my instinct, and this has been confirmed. Karen Middleton had a story in The Guardian on Friday basically saying this, that Albanese wasn't as worried about what impact this would have in terms of stopping mining projects. He was worried about handing the Greens a win in the lead up to this election. And there's only one person Albanese hates more than the Greens, and that's Tanya Plibersek. So he's got this opportunity to fuck both of them over and deliver for what he perceives to be, constituencies and electorates in WA that he wants to hold on to. So it was kind of like a win-win for him. But the blowback to this from Labor already is pretty interesting. I didn't expect it because this is such a supine Labor caucus and a Labor Party that is effectively non-existent in terms of grassroots membership. But Lean, the Labor Environment Activist Network, I am kind of cynical about them, but their convener, Felicity Wade, came out and said, even for true believers, this is pretty upsetting. It's like, I may forgive genocide and everything else, but your refusal to pass a deeply compromised environmental protection agency is like one bridge too far for me. But I think it does suggest how ruthless Albanese is in wanting to make the Greens bend to his will. I don't know how much people care about this in an election context, but seeing stories about Labor MPs briefing their concern about this, I think, ironically, even though the Greens were trying to do a deal to pass this, Albanese's intervention means that they now have a bludgeoning stick to use against him, right? Like, leave aside the safeguard mechanism, housing stuff, they can now be like, we tried to pass an environmental protection agency to protect nature. You guys know animals, they're pretty good. Yeah. And Albanese caved to the mining lobby. That's a very potent weapon for them.
It is hard to tell whether it's like, what does Albanese hate more? Is it doing a deal with the Greens or pissing off the resources and potentially losing seats in WA? But this is from the SMH. This masthead has been told the Prime Minister did not want a Labor Greens environmental deal that could be weaponised by the federal opposition and the resources sector before the next election and lead to a potential scare campaign. So again, sorry, who are the ones playing politics and wrecking and delaying everything again? It's the Greens, is it? Yeah. That's interesting.
It's crazy also because Roger Cook, the WA, he's a Labor Premier. Yeah. Like, what is going on? This guy can't even govern in a way that brings his own Labor premiers to heel. It's nuts.
The Prime Minister's intervention follows warnings that the EPA would be a controversial reform before a federal election, due by May next year, because of an industry campaign against the new powers. The National Environmental Protection Agency would enforce nature regulators and could hand out heavy fines. So again, just regulating environmental laws. This is too much of a threat. This is a disgrace. Representatives from the Miners' Council of Australia, the Western Australia Mining Industry, the Business Council of Australia, and the Australian Forest Products Association are among the industry groups opposed to the EPA. So all we need is environmental protection laws that are supported by the Minerals Council of Australia, the Western Australian Mining Industry, and the Business Council of Australia, and the Australian Forest Products Association. Something that's going to effectively protect nature and enforce our environmental laws that will get all these industry groups on side. That should be easy to do, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy that it hasn't happened yet. And it's part of the reason all these Labor people are losing their minds is because I think Labor's been campaigning for this since 2017. This was put into their platform nearly a decade ago, and Labor was like, we will. And let's be clear, this bill, maybe it's better than nothing, but a lot of environment groups said this is like a dog shit bill. They were annoyed at how weak it was. So again, it was already a compromise. This is the strategy of how environment policy works in Australia, where Labor puts forward deeply compromised bills after consulting with the mining lobby, right? Making sure they're as weak as possible. And then the mining lobby's still like, actually, can you just kill these bills anyway? They're not good. It's the most like cuck behavior you can see in politics. And it's like, they're going to keep doing this to you guys. At what point do you, a Labor government, just pick the fight and pass the good thing? It's we spent a lot of this episode criticizing the Greens, strategy on some issues, but on all of these things, the fundamental problem is obviously the Labor Party's unwillingness to do anything at all.
Oy, 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 oy. All right. Apparently, Parliament is going to be back in February. This is the word that the Senate's going to return for more business in the House of Reps. So that would, if that was true, then that would certainly push back the idea of a March election. The election has to happen by May of 2025. I guess final thoughts. Where do you think we all go to from here? What should be the strategy from the Greens here? What do you think is going to play out in 2025?
Look, I'll be very surprised if there is another parliamentary sitting term. I think we'll have a March election, and even if they do a couple of weeks in February, and we go to like an April election instead, it'll probably end up being just 2 weeks of debate on electoral funding laws or something like that. I don't think there's any big picture legislative stuff left to really deal with in this term from what the government's perspective is. I think the challenge for the Greens after capitulating, this term on some big landmark stuff is to find big fundamental issues that they can differentiate themselves from Labor on and really going for it. And I think, there's a lot of Greens people you hear talk about, the mainstream media is really going for us this time. And I'll admit that it does seem to be a pretty intense campaign from sections of the media on the Greens. But you know what, Tom? It's been the case forever.
Yeah,
right? It's been the case
never going to
the
change.
entire time. And it's also never been easier for a party like the Greens to bypass that establishment. Like, I work for the mainstream media, right? No one fucking reads that shit, And most of the people reading that shit are 70-year-olds, who don't know how to cancel their credit card subscriptions. They're not swing voters. And so I find this kind of contradiction so fascinating, where a party like the Greens has every incentive to ignore the way the media operates, the way the establishment operates, and just speak directly to people, but they still remain cowed by what they read in the opinion pages or what, political correspondents write in their analysis pieces and things. I think it's never been a better time to start paying attention to that and just like hit Labor over the head for being the weakest Labor government in the history of this country. And look, this is maybe a crazy thing for me to say, and when I've sort of shared this idea with my friends, they've gotten mad at me. I think Albanese is a weaker prime minister than Scott Morrison, right? And I'm not saying that because I like Scott Morrison, and obviously I don't, but his inability to have any kind of spine, any kind of policy platform, any kind of ideology, any attempt to prosecute anything that resembles a vision, it's quite stark. It's extraordinary. I think the Greens have an amazing opportunity to expose the Labor government for being so weak. And I think they need to find, the handful of issues to do that on and just go fucking hell for Labor.
Well, I reckon people who listen to this podcast will have strong feelings about all this. You can always message us via Patreon. You can send us an email, hello@seriousdangerpod.com. Maybe next week on the show, we'll go through how people are feeling and processing.
What's the strong feelings about this? They're going to be mad at everything I said, or will they?
Well, they're mad at stuff I said too, yeah. Particularly if they're Max Chandler Mather. Max, if you're listening and you think we've got it wrong here, let us know. Thank you very much for joining us, Oz. We really appreciate it. Love your work as always. If people want to hear more from Osman Faruqi, if you're not reading for the lamestream media anymore, what should we be looking out for?
Well, you know what? I'm actually back on Blue. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm posting.
Yeah.
So check me out there. I have a book coming out next year about race politics and white nationalism in Australia. And I got some fun, exciting stuff launching in the new year, untethered from the mainstream media. So we'll have more to share about that after the Christmas break.
Love it. All right. Thanks, Oz. Great to see you, man. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Tom. Great to be on.
Starts with a pleasure, it ends with a pain. Me and shadification of everything.
Osman Faruqi, everybody. Thanks, Oz. Hey, we thought we'd bring you a taste of our live show recorded in Sydney at the Vanguard last weekend. We were joined on stage by the incredible Jenny Leong and our dear friend, satirist Mark Humphries of the 6:57 p.m. news. Very funny guy, a dear friend, Mark, and it was very kind of him to join us on stage. Thank you again to everybody who came along to check it out. If you want to hear the full episode, You can become a patron at patreon.com/seriousdangerau. Page is $3 a month. You get all that sweet bonus content. Brand new Patreon episode every fortnight. But here's a taste of us having a chat with Mark Humphries. We discussed the words of the year for 2024, which amused us very much. It was great to get Mark's thoughts on those. And you'll hear a sweet little bit from the end of the show when we reflect on 3 years of Serious Danger. Here it is.
We wanted to talk about some really huge news, again, for normal people, which is the word of the year. It's word of the year time, everybody. Yeah, that's right. Cheer, you little nerds. The ANU announced their word of the year this week, which do you know what it was?
Yes, I'm ashamed to say that I do know. And I think it's the first time any of us had ever heard the word of the year. Colesworth?
Colesworth. I've heard this because this is around the whole duopoly grocery prices thing, and the idea that they're the same and they prop each other up and they help sustain the duopoly. So it's the ANU last year they had Matildas. They seem to do it's about the vibe. It's about the vibe of the year. And I've been looking into, every year when I'm reminded about these words of the years, I go and look at them all because I find it interesting. It says something about our society.
I used to have some jokes about some of them. I think previous ones include Bachelor's Handbag, which is the roast chicken you get from the supermarket, and also Halal Snack Pack, I believe, at some point. I think Australia's just fucking hungry.
Well, and they all have, all the different dictionaries and groups have different kind of approaches. Like some of them will be an emerging kind of word, and I want to get to the Macquarie Dictionary does a little bit of that. But sometimes, like Merriam-Webster, for example, in 2023, they chose authentic, which is like fucking boring. What has that got to do with 2023? Sometimes, they also had like Nepo Baby, Riz was Oxford last year, Cosy Lives was Macquarie Dictionary last year. I think that's quite good. What would your pick have been?
Well, I mean, this is more of a phrase, but I think we're all saying that we're all holding space for the lyrics of Defying Gravity.
Defying Gravity, yes.
I think that we're all doing that.
A late nomination.
I think, but my personal word of the year is 2 words, is El Jana. I think El Jana's having a real moment. And who is? El Jana. There's one like next door, I think.
What?
I don't know what
is
that is.
You know what El Jana is?
What's El Jana?
She's royal commissioned to this. El Jana is a charcoal chicken emporium, and they're everywhere now. It's really a thing. People know who El Jana. Okay, and compare that to how many people have heard the word Colesworth. Yeah, right. Okay, El Jana is a better word. Yeah.
All right. Well, the ANU shortlist that was beat out by Colesworth included breaking, because Rachel, what's her name? The breakdancing, the Olympics.
Oh, right. I thought it was that annoying thing where non-journalists go on Twitter and write breaking.
Yes, every politician.
Yes, we've talked about MPs doing that with their own policy fucking announcements. Breaking! I did my job! Shut up. So breaking, so not ray gun, but breaking.
Breaking.
Because of ray gun.
Ray gun would have been, anyway. Climate trigger, ute tax, and YIMBY.
Hello.
So, yes.
The Greens are cutting through.
The Greens are cutting through. No, there's some more. And I was like, apparently it's just they get a bunch of nerds together. I was like, is there some sort of algorithm, some sort of way that they decide what ends up on this short list? No, they just get a bunch of nerds together and they decide what words they think represent the year the most.
Very much stop trying to make fetch happen vibes.
It is a bit that.
Well, because Macquarie, there's a public choice and a academics choice, right?
So, well, I don't know if maybe there is, but Macquarie Dictionary is currently, their votes are open. It's going to be announced on Tuesday, their word of the year. And so they decide a shortlist together and then they put it to the public.
Okay.
They did this media release, which was very funny, full of all these buzzwords to explain their process and that voting was open. Quote, sure, we're still grappling with the relentless Cosy Lives and watching generative AI continue its unstoppable rise from 2023. But 2024 has introduced its own distinctive vocabulary that completely mogs 2023.
I would like to die, please.
Yep.
Sorry, I missed that. What's mogs?
What is mogs?
Mogs, isn't it when you beat out, you totally dominate?
Don't look at me.
I think so. I think that's it.
Anyone want to clarify that? Mogs? Have you mogged something?
Am I right? Yeah, okay, thank you. You sound young. Thank you.
Fact check achieved.
All right, so I know where time is flying by, but let's go through the Macquarie nomination in case anyone wants to vote before it closes, before it's announced on Tuesday.
Okay,
now, just stop me when you have no idea what I'm saying or you have a take. So first they've got the Gen Z slang classics. Brain rot is a nominee.
That's something my dad said about me watching The Simpsons.
Oh, but it's different. It's now referring specifically to like when you scroll too much and it's like brain rot content that's just kind of
all right.
really
I'm expecting the next word to be
quality.
compact disc.
floppy disk. Skibbity, of course, is on the list.
Okay, now I only heard this for the first time yesterday. Something with a toilet?
No. Okay. And I was confused about this too. I was like, it's maybe bad because it's like toilet or it's yucky.
Sorry, Mark. It's like you're a man we've unfrozen from the 19th century. You're like Hugh Jackman in that movie. Okay? Tell me more of your ways.
It doesn't mean anything. It's a nonsense word. You can and like it can be good. A lot of the time it's used as like good, but it could also be bad.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be anything. That's really good. This is where language is heading.
Fatima Payman said skibbity in her big
She said all
Gen
this.
Z
She said
address.
mog. She said
she said them all.
said a lot of these. Looks maxing is also on the list. Are you looks maxing at the moment? You seem to be looks maxing.
I don't, but you'll have to. Can you use it in a sentence?
I don't know. I'm sick of being ugly. I'm looks maxing right now.
Okay, yeah, I've certainly said that. Yeah.
It's when you do everything you can to be the most attractive, and it's usually for men.
Oh, right.
So you would go to the gym, get your jawline, I don't know. Or your face.
Sure. Well, I do go to Ray Martin's hairdresser, so I suppose that, yes, I am.
Yeah. What
the hell?
Looks maxing, yes, we share a hairdresser.
There you go, okay.
You tracked him down, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, because he's got the best.
He's the best.
Only the best. The other, and I wonder if a Sigma, which is the next one on the list, would be looks maxing. Or maybe a Sigma is too cool and doesn't even care about looks maxing.
A Sigma is attractive, excellent, and high-regarded male, which is different to an alpha.
It's different to an alpha. They didn't say this in the definition, but my understanding is actually a Sigma, an alpha is like the leader of the pack, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a Sigma is like, I don't even fucking care about the pack.
Yeah, a couple of Sigmas on stage tonight. Yes. All right.
Bloody
okay,
oath.
moving on to the next nomination, raw dogging. Yep.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll defend
Go
this
ahead.
one. Yeah, because this is because it's now expanded beyond its traditional.
Yes. Traditional usage. That's right.
Also, I've read.
Traditional.
The bunch of teenagers that
The
are
raw
teaching
dogging of your grandpa's raw dogging.
Your
perhaps,
grandpa,
yes.
that's right. That's right.
No, but the group of teenagers who are teaching me about the world of today. Yes, I think it's because now you can like raw dog a flight. I think
Yes,
it's just,
it is specifically about a
Oh, it's
flight.
just flight
But I
specifically.
think that's how it's nominated. My understanding is you can raw dog anything. No,
And to test that theory,
that's right. Live from Newtown.
Please welcome Mark Humphries. Mark, can you hear me? Get out of here.
Okay, we have some interestingly political ones. This is what you're saying. This is where the Greens kind of get some cut through. Right to disconnect is on the list.
oh yeah, okay.
Greens win. We
Yes.
passed those laws.
Hell
Thank you
yeah.
for clapping.
Great.
Rent bidding, which
Okay.
you
Yeah,
might
sure.
be
We'll
familiar
get
with,
onto that.
Mark. Yes,
Yeah.
and enshittification.
Sorry, what?
Enshittification.
Ooh, okay. Again.
Yes.
Define it, please.
Enshittification, deterioration, especially as a result of profit seeking. So like a place or a service getting shitter. They specifically mention social media platforms as well.
Right.
Getting enshittified.
Okay. So that's Elon's business model.
I
is
think it's meant to
enshittification.
be, yes, an
It's
allusion
pretty
to
amazing.
Elon.
It's like you look at something like Uber, for example. Now, there are lots of problems with workers' rights and stuff with Uber, but yeah, the experience, the excitement we all had when Uber arrived is so much better than taxis and stuff.
Yeah.
These days, no one's giving you mints. No one's giving you mints or water or whatever, and it's just getting more expensive. They're the same, it costs the same much as a taxi, basically, and so the enshittification of Uber is often cited as an example.
Right, yes, enshittification. Other ones I didn't know about, fairy porn. Who knows what fairy porn is? Oh, anyone who doesn't want to tell us. It's like fantasy fiction on relationships between humans and supernatural characters. Kind of what it sounds like, I guess.
Okay, so
Yep.
if I was shipping fucking you and a unicorn,
Yes.
that would be fairy porn.
That would be fairy porn.
Can we just give some credit to the one person in that group who went, fairy porn, right?
And everyone's like,
We're all, that's a word that we're using this year, isn't it?
Yeah, really, really
you
popular.
know when you're like fucking fair dogging some raw dogging some
dogging.
fairy porn and
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
mog.
Yeah, skibbity. This is actually, stop laughing because it's a serious
Oh,
one.
sorry.
Incidentaloma. Do you know what?
I don't know what an incidental humor is.
So incidentaloma is when you go to the doctor for something else and they find a tumor. It's like a tumor that you find as a result of another procedure. I think that's kind of interesting. Also, okay, all right, we'll get through the serious ones then, sorry. Cup Murray, which is an earth oven pit for cooking in the Torres Strait Islander style. I also hadn't heard of that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yep,
Yeah,
like
that's-
an Earth thing. And then Q-Day, which I couldn't even understand after reading the definition. It's some computer nerd thing where there's enough quantum computers that your information gets leaked and all our data goes everywhere. I don't know. I kind of tuned off Q-Day.
This Sigma doesn't know anything about that.
True Sigma for that. Okay.
Too busy looking out for pussy, am I right, guys?
Yeah, that's right. Pig butchering.
Just making these up.
These are on the list. Pig butchering.
What is pig butchering?
Well, it seems to just be another phrase for like love scamming. Like you pretend to love someone, you take their money.
Sounds like something you'd read about in fairy porn.
Yeah, that's right. Over
and the wizard did butcher the pig.
Yeah. Spoon bowl.
Spoon bowl?
Spoon bowl, where you have like a game to determine the loser. I don't know.
A loser of what?
The loser of like the team at the bottom of a ladder. So if there's a game that's going to determine who is at the bottom.
Right.
Yes,
okay.
that's a spoon bowl. And then, we're really clearly at the bottom of the list. Social battery, which of mine is running low currently.
I see, right, okay.
You know social battery.
Sure. Sorry, I thought I was suddenly, because we got so serious, I was thinking about the other horrible version of battery. But yes,
no.
that's,
my God.
That's social battery is what happens when you have full strength beer and you're out on the town. But yes, okay, social battery, yes.
And the fact that yes, you have a reserve that can just like diminish over time with your social interactions, which I guess is not something that we understood before. I will finish with the way that the Macquarie article finished about its list of nominations for 2024 Word of the Year, which is, quote, "So, what are you waiting for? Get ready to get off your yats and vote before Australia's Brat Summer is in full swing."
Yeah, Brat Summer.
Oh, dear.
Give it up for the English language, everybody.
Yay.
Well, fair enough.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much our show, right? We're going to go sell some merch and have some
Holy
fun.
shit,
Thank you so much
really
for being
is.
here, Mark Humphries. We appreciate it very much.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for Tom's legs. Yes, please.
Whoa.
Oh, wonderful.
People can catch you. You're touring all over the country with the War on 2024 tour.
Yes, I'll be at the Enmore. There's a big sign that says Sunday, December 16. The correct date is Sunday, December 15.
Good.
Just look out for that.
Get there on a Sunday on whatever day.
If no one shows up, that will be why.
That's why, exactly.
The only possible explanation. Please give a huge round of applause to Mr. Mark Humphries, everybody!
Thank you. Would you like me to get off?
Yeah, get the fuck out of
Go
here.
away, please.
We're done. You can go out the back if you
Go
like.
wait backstage. We'll call you back. Yeah.
Oh my God, that flew by, mate.
That was really quickly. Thank you so much for coming to our show.
Thanks for
getting
coming,
tickets.
Sydney.
Yes.
We want to say a huge thank you to the Vanguard for having us. They've been amazing. Give it up for the amazing people at this amazing venue.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for looking after us. We're going to be selling merch afterwards, as we mentioned. But I think we should acknowledge the fact that I believe on Tuesday, which may or may not be my birthday.
Someone's birthday.
30
Wow.
Very unfleek.
Skibbity for sure.
It is also going to be the 3 years, basically. We will have been doing this show for 3 years.
Yeah. Does anyone remember the first episode? Did anyone listen to the first episode? Yes, because it was Tom's birthday. And we opened and we were like, this is a political podcast. And we were talking about the sex toys that your boyfriend gave you for your birthday. And then we were like, negative gearing, guys.
It's a big issue. What have you learned in our time together, Emerald Boone, on Serious Danger?
You're very tall and I'm very small.
Yes. That's it?
That's it. Yeah.
Well, I love doing this show so much, and doing live shows like this reminds us the fact that people listen, which maybe we forget sometimes. Yeah. It's pretty cool. People are prepared to come out and support it. But I think, going back to the conversation with Jenny about this narrative that's emerging that, things are rough or whatever. Fuck that shit. Man, the political project that we believe in as leftists, as members of the Greens, I think is still sorely needed. It's more needed, than ever before, and every single day we see that. And I just love broadcasting to other people who believe in that and who show up and who love talking about that and fighting for that.
Yes.
And I love working with you so very much.
I love working with you,
It really is an honor.
Yes.
And I've organised nothing.
That's really sweet. I didn't get you a birthday present either. So,
fuck.
No, I think it's true. And when you are just bombarded with fucking terrible takes from the internet and from the media and political class constantly, to be able to have conversations where even just me personally, when I talk it through every week on the podcast, and then I'm like, okay, no, we're not absolutely crazy. We're not on the wrong track. We're not radical fucking terrorists.
Yes.
We are just trying to make the world a better place.
I mean, just speak of words that are overused, potentially, the term gaslighting maybe gets thrown around. But there is a political media culture that is designed to convince us that, yes, we're idiots, better things aren't possible.
Yeah.
The best we can hope for is full-strength beer in Western Sydney suburbs. It's like, no, we can believe in something better. And I really felt that yesterday walking around Rising Tide, right? Like that was a mass movement of people who were standing up for what they believed in, taking on forces that are so much more powerful than any of us, and winning, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
And I just think, yes, if our little podcast can be a weekly reminder of that, then we're doing something right.
Yeah. Here's to us. Thank you for coming,
everybody. Cheers to you for making the show possible. That is it for us. Thank you again so much for coming out to Serious Danger. We will see you again, Sydney. We love you, New South Wales.
Bye.
Yay! Thanks again to everyone who came out in Newcastle and Sydney. We love you. If you want to hear that full episode from Sydney, it was released as this week's Patreon episode, patreon.com/SeriousDangerAU. And just $3 a month, you get the full back catalogue and you get to hear bonus content from us all the time. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening. Again, any feedback on this stuff, about how you're feeling, about where the Greens are at, hello@seriousdangerpod.com is our email. You can also follow us on socials at SeriousDangerAU, on Twitter, Instagram, and on YouTube, where we just clicked over 2,000 subscribers, which means the world. Not as many as Friendly Geordies, but still doing okay. For all your needs, you go to SeriousDangerPod.com, including some merch stuff. I believe there'll be more updates there if you want to buy some more merch. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week. Bye.
Serious Danger in Australia.
It's Serious Danger. It is a podcast about green politics in Australia. I'll try that again because I fucked it up, which is ridiculous. It's Serious Danger. It's a politics. Oh, fuck.
I'm making you nervous, man. It's all right. You're killing it.
I know. Oz is here.